I request Honorable Vice Chancellor of Shri Vaishnav Vidyapith Vishwavidyalaya, Dr. Upinder Dhar, for the welcome address. Over to you, sir.
I'm very happy to welcome all the guests and resource persons for PRATITI. In fact, this happens to be the last webinar of 2022. We have been organizing these webinars for more than 2 years now. We began organizing these webinars pre-ISAGA 2021. That was, we started it from December 2020, when COVID-19 was at its peak. And in 2020, we could not host ISAGA. But then we started this webinar series till ISAGA 2021 was held in September 2021. But then thereafter, we continued with this series and we have been doing it very successfully, and we are very happy that the feedback received from those who have attended these webinars has been excellent. In fact, we have also produced a compilation last year of all those webinars which were presented between 2020 and 2021. And this year also, now this happens to be the last webinar, we'll be presenting the compilation based on the presentations. So I would once again like to welcome Herman van der Beek, Martin Westy, Marine Voss. And I'm sure that all those who have joined us are very eager to listen to the resource persons, and we will, while enjoying the session, we'll be also learning. So with these words, happy learning to all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will start. I will be interviewing Herman and Martin today. And we discussed that it is no tailor-made story, but it's a journey. And because we find it the most interesting if we follow your questions. But before we start immediately with questions, we will give you some context about why we are here for, and some small introduction. So my name is Marijne. It's a very difficult name for abroad. Sorry?
Excuse me. May I give introduction to all our speakers?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, of course. Of course.
Thank you. So before starting the today's webinar, let me introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Herman van der Beek. He is a game designer and concept developer at Imagine Management Games. He has over 35 years experience in education, consultancy, and business gaming. He has initiated and developed many business simulations, which have been attended by more than 1 lakh people. Mr. Herman has a master's in mathematics and information sciences from the University of Groningen, as well as master's in change management from SIOO. He worked as university lecturer, program advisor, and management consultant before he founded Imagine Management Games in 1994. Welcome you, sir. Our next speaker is Mr. Martin Verstees. Mr. Martin is a master trainer at Facilitation. He grew up in a small village in the center of Holland. He attended the University of Leiden, where he studied history. For a number of years, he worked in local government, rising through the various management positions, where he eventually became a self-employed interim manager. In 1994, he teamed up with his business partner, Mr. Herman van der Beek, to start their simulation game company. He turned out to be a natural simulation facilitator, keen on having his Participants learn about things like communicating, working together, and ensuring they have fun. Mr. Martin has run hundreds of simulations all over the world, and over the years, he has trained many others to be simulation facilitators. Our next speaker is Ms. Marijen Bos, the Netherlands. The work of Miss Marijen Bos was best summarized by her son Tom. Mama creates game for adults because work can be so much more enjoyable. She is an organizational advisor and facilitator and has experience in change management, appreciative inquiry, business model canvas, design thinking. She combines her experience to create playful working methods. Ms. Margin is co-author of the serious book of play in the Netherlands. This book describes how to create playfulness in organizations. I welcome all of you in the webinar. As this is an interactive session, I request all the participants and panel members to ask the questions during the session. You may write your questions in the question and answer tab below as well. Now I hand over the session to the team. Thank you.
Thank you, Rupali. I'm sorry I started too soon with my conversation, so I'm sorry for that. But welcome everybody. I think it's my enthusiastic statue that I started too soon. But so it's what I already told. My name is Marijne. Thank you for the introduction. And it's no handmade story, so please ask your questions in the Q&A. But before that, maybe first a small word from Herman. And Herman, because I know you can tell very enthusiastic about play. Why are you so passionate about play? Maybe you can introduce yourself by that. Oh, you're in mute.
That's not a neat. Well, actually, as far as I remember, I was interested in games and play, and for the last 30 years, especially, I'm concerned with games that you can use as experiential learning environments, and it's not really an answer on your question. But I'm especially interested in games that have many runs. Because when you have many runs, it allows you to study the effects and see what works and what doesn't. And so our most successful game has more than 7,000 runs all over the world. And we have revised it twice and it's still not finished. Things will never end. There's always something new that you find out, and even if you have played a game many times, and that's intriguing.
Yes, and we will tell you something more about the context, what kind of games you want to play. But first, I will ask Maarten. Maarten, can you tell me maybe your most interesting game sessions and why you find it so interesting? Your most interesting session? Over all these years you facilitate games?
Well, that would take a while because many sessions have been very interesting, especially the ones where something went wrong. Because that's when I learn to improvise and to make sure that everything goes well in the end anyway. And that will help me tell Herman how he could sort of change the game to make sure that doesn't happen again, or to make sure that it does happen again. So there you have the intercourse is not the right word, of course, but I'm sorry about that. But this is how Herman and I work together.
Yeah. So this seminar, this webinar is about the relation between game designing and facilitation. And we try to make we try to tell you something. But before we start, maybe it's smart if we talk about a game, what we mean, because there are a lot of different kind of games. So can you start, Maarten, by explaining what kind of games you make and facilitate? Then I will share my screen. or Herman?
Yeah.
It's this one. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what you see here is different pictures from our games. You can see people in despair, people talking to each other, working and phoning at the same time. So we try to make them very realistic. And so no computers, it's all bits and dots. Maybe
So
you could
they're
add something, Herman.
yeah.
Well, you see people at work and you see it's not real. Especially the one in when you look closer at the guy, you see he's pushing a paper-made container and there are parts in it, and he's very engaged. Well, it's not real because he's having a conversation with customer service. You have people that are desperate, and you have people that go through thick and thin to get things done, and that's very special about games. They trigger emotional learning processes, and that makes them completely different from other experiential learning environments. For what you have learned in an emotional context, you will never forget. And this is what no, that's I think that's enough as an impression of games, the games that we are using.
Well, let me add that what Herman said was about people not forgetting the experience. I've met people 10 years after, and they immediately say, "Hey, Martin, you remember the game?" So after 10 years, it's still very in their minds. And that is the quality of Herman's games, of course.
And why is that? Can you tell me a little bit why do they still remember it?
Because it
That
is
was the
very
secret.
realistic, although it's not real, as you can see on the left picture there and the other pictures as well. But its design is so realistic that people immediately recognize that it's about them. You know, it's a metaphor. Like the service management game is about a logistics firm, but everyone immediately recognizes, aha, this is about us. So it's realistic and it's relevant to their own environment.
And you play what I hear is that it's realistic. You play it in several rounds. You don't play one round, you play several rounds. And it's a business simulation. So you simulate the context about what kind of, can you give us a little bit an example of what are you simulating?
Well, in this case, like I said, it's a logistics game, but we also have a game with an insurance company or an amusement park. So we always use a metaphor.
Okay, and what are the learning outcomes?
Well, it's in the end, it all comes down to communicating and working together, sharing knowledge, and the experience is that people will find out that that is not just something we can start with tomorrow. You need to work on it every day because it's difficult. It sounds easy. Let's communicate better. Yeah, okay. But how? And who? And when?
Yeah.
Martin mentioned the realism and the relevance, and that's really a very important design issue, because we believe that players should recognize their daily work in the game always. And therefore we start by describing the work organization. We identify all the actors, the interaction between the actors, and the activities they perform, and the tools they use, and the meaning they give to their activities too. This is slightly based on Peter Checkland's CATRO analysis. Peter Checkland, well known from the soft systems methodology. And the CATRO acronym stands for a customer, the one who has advantage, the actor who is performing the transformation, the activities in as an input-output. The Weltanschauung, this what is the meaning of what they're doing, owner, environment, and then you have a global view of all the actors and actor diagram actually, and then we determine a list of claims and concerns and issues and events to be addressed in the game, and this list helps you to simplify the initial description. You determine which actors you can omit and which actors you can represent through events and which activities you can combine and so on. So this is very helpful. And this way you lay the foundation of a realistic and a relevant game. And realistic because people recognize their day-to-day work in the game, and relevant because the issues that arise in the game match their learning needs. And it takes you just 4 90-minute meetings with your client to get this done, and that's really a good start.
Yeah, and I already have a question also about this relevance and enthusiastic and engaging of players from Elizabeth in the chat, because she asked about the photo that one man is kneeling and that he's very engaged, and he's asking about what happened next. Do you still remember it? This. I don't know.
I think
which
it's a session with I was not in that session, but Martin was probably.
Can I see the picture again?
Yes, I will share my screen.
That's always nice to have
it's on the table.
What
he's
happened
kneeling,
next?
He's kneeling on the table.
Ah, yes. Well, they were building some kind of amusement park attraction, and they had only about 2 minutes to finish it. And they really went for it. But unfortunately, I know they were too late.
Mm.
So they learned, for example, to start on time next time. So it's people can go really well. And what happened next is that they all sort of sighed and said, oh no, we didn't make it. And then, like I said, we do the games in rounds. So we evaluate the things that happened in, like say, the second round, and then they get the chance for about 20-30 minutes to improve their organization, to improve their way of working together, to make new arrangements. You do this, I do that, and et cetera, et cetera. And then we do another round to see if their plan is working.
Thank you. I just saw that he must have been so engaged. I'm sure he probably was unaware that he was kneeling on the table.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And to get a group of people to be so engaged in the game, you need to have a very good introduction.
Yes.
So you can take them with you in the story of the metaphor. And this particular game is about project management, and participants need to build up the amusement park. And there's all kinds of rules and regulations that have to be met. And so they really get into it. And that story of taking them into the story is something you build in a series, like Herman already mentioned, in a series of games, of executions of that game. So you learn every time, okay, this word that works, I need to say this, I need to touch that to show something. And you build that story over the weeks and months and even years, because, you know, after 25 years, you still learn, you say, hey, what happens next? That's for me, that's the fun part. There's always something else.
I agree. And I love your term of taking them with you into the metaphor. That's a really lovely way of thinking about it. Thank you.
Yes, it's vital, I would say.
Yes, I agree.
And thank you very much, Elizabeth. I hope I pronounced your name right.
Yeah, it's fine.
About asking these questions, because that is really helping us in this webinar. So please do so. Ask question in the chat.
Sure.
Then we bring them to the. And we have again immediately a question. So how can we produce a simple game? So a simple game, they say, do you have like simple games? Herman, Maarten, do you play simple games with 15, 30 minutes? And what elements do you, what elements must be considered if you play a simple game or make a simple game? Can you tell me something about that? Herman, maybe start?
Actually, I don't know how to make a simple game. All our games are complex, and with a reason. With a reason. That's about games are a typical example of learning through experience, and we believe in the self-determination theory is the basis for this type of learning processes. And therefore we apply this theory in our game design. So we have no simple games because we want the games to be complex and challenging. That's regarding competence of people and regarding relatedness. Players cannot do it on their own. They always need others they have to cooperate with other players. Regarding autonomy, players determine the learning objective and the order in which they reach this objective. There's no predefined goal, and we have no hardcore scenario. Metaphorically speaking, you could say that players make a journey along issues that they experience in their daily work. So the game is nothing more than a mirror of what they have in their daily work, and so. Simple games, we don't have them in our portfolio.
Well, let me add something to that, because our games are also very flexible, because they are complex, but they need to be flexible because not every group is capable of the highest level of complexity. So you have to have means as a facilitator to vary in the level of complexity, because people need to be challenged, but then don't want to be over challenged, because then they will say, oh, we can't do this, and then they will learn nothing. So you need to be able to create the right level of complexity for the level of the group, so to speak.
Yeah, and so you can vary in how you play your games, but is it also that you add on complexity in the next round? So you start simple and then...
In some games, like the amusement park game, that starts with a simple target, and the complexity grows over the round, yes. But normally, we tend not to add complexity during the game, because people would feel maybe manipulated, all right? And that's not something we want to happen. So in general, we have rather strict rules at the beginning, and then see how they work. And if they are too complex, you can say, oh, well, never mind that, you know, or it's better to tax people. You make sure there's, suppose there's money involved in the game. If they have too much money, they can start buying their way out of trouble, and that is not when you learn something. So you need to make sure that the money is short, and Herman is a master of doing that, and to make sure that they just all the time not have enough money. So they need to go to a bank, for example, and when you go to the bank, you need to have a plan. And if the plan is good, there's always money. But they have to have a plan. In that case, making that plan will help them learn. So those are the elements that make a game as good as it is.
Yeah, and one more, because I'm very curious about this manipulation and honest games, because I know you find that very important to have honest games. How do you take care for that as a facilitator, that people don't feel manipulated?
Well, there's the trick.
No, it's
No, but,
it's
you know,
always
the-
it's also a design issue. I think it's very important. The honesty is part of the psychological safety. You often read in literature that games provide a safe environment to experiment, and that's only partially true. If you limit safety to system safety, the company doesn't go bankrupt and the reactor does not overheat. But psychological games are not offer no safety at all. And with a bad facilitator, that easily can lead to accidents. And from a design perspective, you have several options. One of this is the honesty. So the game is honest. It does not say in one instruction that something is red and in the other instruction that something is blue. We don't need that, and people don't have to fear for that.
no, all the
There's a lot more to
information
say about
that
psychology safety.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Maarten. Herman, what do you want to say, Maarten? You wanted to
Well,
add?
like Herman said, the instructions are fair and true. And also, if they ask me a question, I will give a straight answer. So no, nothing in the sleeve, as they say. This is important for people to feel safe.
Yeah.
All the information they need to do it right first time is there. But of course, they need to get experience, and you need at least one round for everyone to understand what he or she should do. So they learn again and again and again.
One of the things Maarten mentioned is you build it up. So that's also for psychological safety. You prevent information overflow. Some people don't like to read too much, so we build in a trial round and do not explain more than is strictly needed and necessary for the trial round. And then the things they do have meaning, and then it's much easier to think of themselves what they can do in the next round. You don't have to explain that anymore in text or what. So in our early games, we had 3-4 pages of instructions, and now it's no more than some simple bullets, and that's enough in most cases.
Yes, and you have to tell, like I said before, bring them with you in the metaphor. So you explain the whole thing rather than write it all down. And the more you write down, the more chance people have to interpret it. And that leads to misunderstandings. So the shorter the instruction, the better.
So that is our a little bit about the game and also how to facilitate. And there are some more questions about the facilitation, because Elizabeth is asking, what do you think are essential skills of knowledge of the future gaming facilitator, or to avoid to be a bad facilitator? And she says, you already mentioned psychology safety, but what else do you think is important?
What else is important?
Flexibility.
Flexibility.
The flexibility of the game is very important. I think that's the core of our business simulations, that they're very flexible. Flexible in time, flexible in group size, flexible in learning levels and learning needs.
Well,
So I'm particularly interested in what you two, as the facilitators of the game, have as skills and knowledge that supports and sustains the flexibility of the game. So within yourselves as simulation professionals. So you also mentioned Catwo, which I understand Peter Checklin's work. I love the phrase "nothing up your sleeve," but that's a really interesting phrase. How, if considering today there is lots of people who are learning to manage simulations, what are the things they need to know or be able to do to sustain that flexibility of the game, any game?
Well, I think the most important thing is not to be a perfectionist, because if you are a perfectionist, you will be very disappointed every time because things will always go
Go
wrong.
wrong. Yes.
So
Thank you.
Herman always says he's a fly on the wall. He just watches, observes, and then gives the team feedback after the round. Well, you can see this here, but I'm 2 meters tall, and it's very hard for me to be a fly on the wall. So my style is slightly different, but the end result is normally the same.
And we also had it like that. The personality of the facilitator is also making the game. You told me when we prepared this conversation that that's also very important. Can you tell us a little bit about your two different kind of styles? Because I think we can also learn a lot about that, how you facilitate games, because you work so long together, so you know each other. So maybe Mark, you can, Herman, you can tell something about the style of Martin and why he's so good as a facilitator, and
Well,
the other
man,
way
watch
around.
Be
Well,
careful.
Martin is very good in provoking people and provoking in a nice way. You can explain that better than I am. And
yeah, but I will ask immediately.
I don't care much about what is happening in the game. Well, not a bit, but I let people when they take bad decisions, it's okay with me. We always try to help them to get out of it. But I don't care if they work themselves in trouble.
Herman lets them hit the bottom. Whereas I sort of try to avoid the absolute bottom. But it's also good when people get into real trouble, because then they need, and of course we help to get them up again.
And can you tell us an example, because you know I like that, about provoking? What do you do if you provoke people in a game without manipulating them? So what do you do?
Well, when people are working in the simulation, and suppose I notice two people who are sort of waiting, not doing much, then one way of getting them back into the game is to walk over and say, hey, listen, you see these three people over there? They are planning something that you will not like. So get over there and make sure they don't do that. So in that way, I sort of help people to stay engaged in the game.
That are your kind. You can have a different kind of style as a facilitator. So some people are a little bit more laid back, and some people are more provoking. And what is a bad facilitator? The one who is too perfect, or
Absolutely.
likes too much control? Yeah.
If you want control, you better become a teacher or something. You never should be a facilitator if you
train conductor.
You have to follow. Yeah, you have to follow the flow and follow what people are doing, and they're deciding which direction you go. And of course you like that they see some topics that are part of the game. But if they miss the topics, okay, then well, in the end you can tell something about it. But as long as they are playing, you just have to follow them.
And I know about your games that you evaluate a lot between rounds. You told me that is very in your games you do a lot of evaluation and transfer in the rounds. Or can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I wrote every week. I write a small we call it on LinkedIn, just 150 words, something about what's puzzling me, and once people start playing, they step into the magic circle, and if you step out of this magic circle, then the spell is broken and the game ends. And some facilitators take this very literally, and they believe players should not talk about the daily reality before the game has ended. And in earlier years, I followed this recommendation. Even skipped lunch lunchtime and had sandwiches delivered because they should stay in the game and not out of it. But it was inevitable that after each round, players began talking about what happened and in the game and how that relates to their work. It was happening every time. And they say, oh, okay, aha, so this is how it is, and this is why this is happening in our daily reality. And they found solutions in the game, and they were eager to implement the daily reality solutions and eager to implement it in the game. And we found out that you don't have to skip lunch. Even a sumptuous dinner with wine could not disrupt the process. They after an hour they came back in the game and they just jumped into it again. And so, from a design perspective, I don't have the answer actually, and I'm still thinking of it. I've played classical games like Hexagon and Fish Banks and Slogan, and these are. It works best if you stay in the game for all these three types of games, I think. And when I compare these games with our games, the main difference is that it's harder to rate the activities in Hexagon with the daily reality. More difficult than it is in the games we make. And this is intriguing because we use the same design principles to design a game, and still you have these differences. So there is something in our games that makes people to become very, very engaged. And no, we're still puzzling on it.
So if I understand, they in your games they make a quicker move from the magic circle in, out, in it again and out it again. And do you do something in your facilitation, Martin, to stimulate this?
Of course, we explain as good as well as we can what to do, how it works, but not how they decide to have their decisions. That's up to them. But the games we design are so well, I think they're so good that people are okay, let's start again, here we go. And but working for about say 20-25 minutes and then stop and discuss what happened because it's fresh. They are this happened 5 minutes ago. You see, you can even call for a timeout during the round when something very special happens that you want to share with everyone. Hey, listen up, everyone. This happens here. Now what to do? So you have even in between, within the round, you can have a discussion on certain topics. But I think I've done a timeout about 4 times in 35 years. So normally,
okay, it's thinking about my hockey practice. They also do timeouts and saying where is everybody standing in the field. Then we are standing too close, or that's I understand it's a little bit like working like that. Like, okay, what is going wrong or what is happening here? What's very successful? Yeah. And maybe I don't know how we are in time, Rupali. What time we end? A little bit question between it.
Yes, ma'am. You can continue your session. This time
okay.
2:30, but we have started late. That's why. You may
Okay. Because I wanted to also ask you a little bit about the outcomes and the learning objectives. And Elizabeth also asked a very good question. I hope I say it right, Elizabeth. Otherwise, you have to intervene me. But how do you convince businesses to play this game, or that there's you use a longer time, or wait one moment, or maybe you can ask them themselves your question, Elizabeth. Sorry.
I will give you a context. Recently, I spoke to a potential client about the design of a game about encouraging attitudes to ability and disability. And I failed to have them pay attention to it. Instead they just did a panel and discussion. So because it seemed like it was going to take too long. So what are your rationale for having a business take on those longer timing periods that you've been talking about in your game? What is the sales pitch, I suppose?
Let me tell you, Elizabeth, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, I've found
And
that.
especially over the years, we have had to sort of alter the games a little bit to make it shorter, because people don't take the time anymore. And so we have, through experience, found out that we can do, for example, the service management game that used to take a full day, and now we can do it in 4 or 5 hours. Still a bit long for some
Which
business.
is, yes, yeah.
But you know, you need to convince them that they will really, really learn something. One of my slogans is, one day of gaming will skip 20 meetings of 2 hours.
Wow,
So
I love
takes
that as
more
an
time,
argument.
what takes more time, you see? So it is a very intensive experience, rather than just sitting down and talking about the same topics over and over and over again, rather than, okay, let's do it. So, and let's do it is in a safe environment. Things can go wrong, but the business will survive. So it's not easy, but after let's say I'll sell them one game as an experiment, and then at the end of that day or afternoon they will say, aha, they should do this game too, and they should do this game too, and then things get easier.
Thank you. I love that. I love that equivalence. Sorry, Herman.
And maybe we should take more time for it, because 4 hours is too short, actually. The return of learning is more when you have 6 hours or 7 hours.
Yeah.
The convincing is the doing, actually, showing them, not telling.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you have another question about it, Elizabeth?
Not at the moment. No, thank you. I love the idea of saying 1 hour of game or 1 day of gaming is equivalent to 20 hours of meetings, because that then puts it makes it it's a good metaphor, and it makes it very concrete. Yeah. They see the value of the time saved. Yeah. Thank you.
And what do you do about, because we talked about perfection in the facilitation, but you also have like perfection from the business, the designer of your who wants the game. So how do you, because I think sometimes they want to know what is the outcome of the game. So what do you do about that?
Well, that's unpredictable, of course, because you don't, but in general terms, you can tell, make sure next day you have your doors wide open, because your people will have brand new ideas that they want to share with you. So there's always something. People always learn something.
And about this learn, sorry, Martin, Herman. Yes.
I love games with an open ending. I said before, we never use fixed scenarios. Of course, you use scenarios, but they're not really. You can decide not to follow it, and we let players. We prefer to let players take a journey. I said along a variety of topics, and there's no ideal solution. So in our games, there's no best option of best way, or for example, in our service management game, the customers determine whether the service organization is doing a good job, like in real life. So we make the games as realistic as possible, and in real life there is no one person says this is the right decision, this is the right solution. People have to discuss this themselves. They have to agree upon what is good and when they are successful or not. And it's not something the facilitator should do. Or it's always the of course you can tell them that there are other options and other possibilities. But in the core, the players themselves decides what is when they are successful. Open-ended, and no perfect solution. That's typical for our games.
And how does it relate to the learning objectives of a game?
Well, as I said before, when you design a game, then you make a list of topics and claims and concerns and issues and things and events, and some of these claims come back. You see some issues you will see in the game when you play it, and others you don't see it, because that's dependent of what the group what the decisions, because the decisions people take do matter. There is so they can take bad decisions and good decisions. That's equal to me, actually. So the learning objective is that they have conversations about things that worries them in their daily work, actually, and these worries differ from group to group, from business to business. But what you can say is, in a project management game, that we address some project management issues, or that we can address it. Which one? That's up to the players themselves. Okay, this.
I have another question.
Learning objective is that you have conversations.
Yeah,
Yes,
I understand.
That's one thing we ask businesses that hire us is, what do you want them to talk about? And then we try to make sure that they do talk about that. So, and they normally will, although it sometimes happens that a business director talks about a problem that they have, and then during the game you find out that there's another problem. It's quite a different problem, so that then it's a bit difficult, because you have to go back to the director and say, hey, you don't have a clue of what's going on here. Then after that he has to pay us, that's pretty good.
And I think it's difficult for directors that are very much controlled and have a lot of perfection in them. So I have another question I want to ask you in the chat. So I don't know if it's Dr. Finnot is asking, football, tennis, hockey, and similar popular games are not simulation. Their players use strategy and show teamwork. How can we debrief such a game to understand strategy, teamwork, skills, etc.?
That's interesting. One of the things is that these are sport games and they're competitive. And in our simulations, you don't have competition because there is a business, and when you have competition in business, in general, it's not very good for the business. Actually, you have to cooperate.
You have to find a common goal.
So that's the first thing that comes up. Martin.
Well, I'm not the manager of the Dutch football team, but I'm sure, excuse me, I'm sure Mr. Van Gaal would have a very lengthy answer to your question.
The question is very interesting, and I don't have an answer. I have to think about this. As I said, our games do not use competition, and these are, and I think these are you can debrief these games, the football, tennis, etc. But I have no idea how to do that. I'm sorry.
You don't play soccer, Herman?
Not anymore. I've played frisbee, ultimate frisbee, and that was.
I have another question, and it's nice because I think we are almost on time. So to ask him to give a chance to answer this question, I just will read it to you. It's like a PhD candidate, a researcher about gamification for adults in working environments to create an innovative mindset. So he's making games to create an innovative mindset. And he's very keen on deepening the relation game time, meeting time. So are there any pubs about the relation, 1 hour of team game, 20 hours of meeting, or anyway, something
Yes.
experiments about these relationships?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something to say about it. I've made some notes about this.
Maybe if you look up to your notes, maybe Martin can already answer a little bit.
No,
Yeah.
I'm very fast in finding notes.
Okay.
In general, it's about how much time it takes to develop a game. Is that correct?
I don't know if that is the question. I think
No,
it's about the relation. Yeah, you help us out, Elizabeth.
The question goes back to the comment that I think Martin made about 1 hour of like a day of games is equal to 20 meetings, which I understood was a metaphorical comment, but I can see that this doctoral student is very keen to see if there is literature
that's
where anybody has actually researched that. And my personal answer is I'm not sure. My instinctive answer is I would totally support that. So maybe it's Adriano. So maybe this is Adriano's research coming to life to work out ways to demonstrate that. I'm not sure. It for me, while you guys think about it, that's one of those hindsight questions. You can only really answer a question like that sometime after the game, because if you're looking at time equivalence, people will often measure just the, well, I've told you, and it took me 15 minutes to tell you, so that's all you needed to know. And it doesn't do what I'm seeing you two talk about, which is the physical, emotional, psychomotor, CATWO, structured engagement that then changes the behavior. So I don't know, Adriano, for me, I don't know if there's an answer. I would, but I think that's what the question is about. So do you know of any research, or maybe that's something you could construct some research around your own work?
Not right now. I'd have to. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what is saying is also you don't if there's a presentation or stuff or training, then you don't know if people get the information. But in a game, you see what they do. So you also see, I think, what if they are getting the information or behaving like it, or and that's also bringing me to another question. It's like, does people also experiment in your games? Do they experiment more because it's a game, or do you think they stay with their common behavior? Martin, can you say something about that?
I remember a time when there was a consultant at a company, and he invited us to run a game because he was wondering if people were actually doing what they said they were doing. And so in the game, he could watch them. And he said to me afterwards, he said, now I know what they're doing. It's completely different from what they say they're doing. So in this case, the game gave him an insight about what people were really doing. See, and so we have a game called A Hard Effort. That's a question and answer game. And if you do that for 1 hour, again, it saves you 25 interviews of an hour to get to know what people think about things. So you see that the time you spend is very effective.
Yeah, but it's important to say, I think you don't do assessment games, eh?
No, we are not assessors. We are not psychologists. But over the years, I've learned a few tricks.
Yeah. There's another question, and that's about why is it and that's my own translation of this question. Why don't we use these games in education, or why is it yeah, I think we do, but why do we do it so less in educational settings?
Well, we do. We get hired by institutions, universities, applied sciences, but that's a different thing altogether, because people are there to learn a specific way of project management, for example, and the game helps enormously. I do 3 or 4 times a year for an educational firm a day of process management. And these people, they can enroll in the course and they don't know each other. That is a completely different setting from a group of people that is used to work together. And then you get comments like, oh, Charles, that's exactly what you do all the time. And I hate that. Stop doing it. And with the other open group, they don't know each other. So those comments will not come up, which makes it less fun, really.
Mm.
Yeah, Dr. Ramesh Shamar, did I explain your question right, or do you have something to add on, maybe?
You asked me. I'm sorry. I was thinking about another question, so I didn't.
No. Herman, I asked. Sorry, I asked Ramesh. Yeah, Sharma. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, can you explain was that the question, or did you meant something else?
No, it's okay. I wanted to say that people in the educational institutions, including the teachers as well as the administrators, they don't treat the including the games as a pedagogical measure or a tool. They mostly consider it either as an extracurricular or co-curricular. So, but the research has indicated that these games in 2 forms, either as game-based learning or as gamification, they both have a lot of potential. But still, we prefer to go with the usual chalk and talk, lecture methods, and these things. And in addition to a change in the mindset, and as Elizabeth has rightly pointed out, that we need to draw the parallels on how, because learning that scenario means what can be done to bring it as a mainstream methodology.
So, Ramesh, I have, well, for everyone, I've put in the chat, I have recently reread an article by Malcolm Knowles. And I think what Martin and Herman are talking about, Malcolm began addressing in 1977. You might find it a useful explanation of why we are where we are, perhaps not so good for answering your question about how do we change that? Because for me, workplaces are easier to use games in than formal education. And I think, so because we expect classrooms to be formal, so it's okay to do games at work, but not in universities, unfortunately. I don't know what Martin and Herman, or Marianne, what do you think about that? That maybe games are less welcome?
Maybe that's why students, they feel that education is boring.
Oh, of course they do.
Like I said before, there are a couple of universities in the Netherlands that use our games in their curriculum.
Then you have made a breakthrough. Well done.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, we train the teachers to run the games for them, because otherwise it will be too costly for them. But that works quite well.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's great.
I can add a little story because I'm new in this world of games, and I just made a big mistake to do a game in the educational context. And it was very nice. They played the game and they had a lot of fun, but they did it really childish. So they did role playing and they didn't learn so much about it. And when I asked them about reflection, there was like a gaze in their eyes, like reflection about what? So
Mhm.
I called Herman to
Poor you.
ask him what kind of mistakes I made in my design. And maybe Herman, you can tell me a little bit about it because I think it's interesting what I did wrong when you make a game for educational
Purposes.
Well,
purposes.
there's only one thing important: it's relevance, relevance, relevance. It has to be relevant for the people that you have in your game. There must something in the game that triggers them and say, oh, this is what I want to know more about it, and that takes time because that's not obvious all the time. Sometimes you have to explain that, so you have to take your time. And the next thing is that I prefer to have when you had a 1 or 2 time run of the game, or
Yeah, it was very short. It was a
just very
simple
short.
short game.
You had little time, so that's
Yeah.
another thing. You have to take have to ask for enough time to do it. And to play around so that they learn to reflect. Reflect is something you can't, you have to learn. You have to help them to reflect. And it takes time. But the first thing is relevance. If a game is not relevant for the students, then they think they're playing Monopoly or something, or PRATITI or anything. And then they see it as a game. So it's not something you can learn from.
Yeah, and also the points, my mistake I made was that it was a simulation about business, and these students didn't know what business are about.
Yes.
So it was also not realistic for them. So they were playing how they heard about what a business is and what an executive is doing.
Mm.
So they were saying, no, I'm doing nothing because an executive doesn't do anything. So that's why also I think it was a play and not playing a game to learn something. So I learned a lot about it. But I think there's a big difference in work settings than in educational settings. But I think you have more knowledge about that than I do.
Right at the beginning, Martin said, no, Martin or Herman said, I learn most when things go wrong. And yeah, at this, I really agree with that. So Marlene, you have learned a lot when it went wrong, and please keep doing that learning because I think it's important, and you really didn't do anything badly wrong. But sometimes I think, to answer Dr. Ramesh's question further, for me, there is a great fear of doing something wrong in an academic environment. So that kind of closes down the capacity to be open to learning. Whereas in the workplaces that Martin and Herman are talking about, the need to be open is stronger. So don't let that problematic session stop you from keep going.
No. And I have 2 very experienced persons around
You
me. So that's also
do.
helpful. That's also helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's, I think we are on time, but maybe one last question. Rupali, how are we? I think.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it already, do we have to end the session, or do we have some time for a last
If
question?
you want to take last question, then.
Okay. So maybe to the participants, do we have a last question for Herman or Martin before we end this question? So I will see the chat.
We always end up with more questions than answers. That is typical.
Yeah, maybe you have to add something, Herman, that we didn't discuss yet at the last thing to say. or
No,
Maarten?
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to share our views on game design and game facilitating. I've learned something a lot. Thank you.
Famous last words.
Yes. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for the opportunity again. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you, ma'am. So we have successfully completed with all the questions from the session. Now, for the words of thanks, I would like to invite Coordinator of Center of Excellence in Gaming and Simulation, Dr. Jigyas Tubist.
Thank you, Rupali. I, on behalf of the Center of Excellence in Simulation and Gaming, COESG, and Shri Vaishnav Vidyapit Vishwavidyalaya, Indore, India, would like to give our most sincere thanks to Mr. Harman, Mr. Mashin, and Ms. Voss for accepting the invitation and giving precious time out of their busy schedule. I am really thankful to them. In addition to that, we are also thankful to Dr. Upinder Dhar, Vice Chancellor of the University, and Dr. Santosh Dhar, Rector of the University, for their guidance. We also express our sincere gratitude to our panelists for interactive webinar, Dr. Elizabeth, Dr. Ramesh Sharma ji, Dr. Vinod Damlekar ji, and all other panelists present, and the participants who make this webinar successful. I am also thankful to Professor Rupali Bhartiya and all the members of COESG and IT team of the university for excellent support. At the end, wishing all of you Merry Xmas and Happy New Year in advance. We will meet again in January 2023. Thank you all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dubey. That was great. And thank you guys. I really loved it.
Thank you so much, all of
Good.
you.
Nice to hear.
Very wonderful session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I request all the
Bye-bye.
participants to please fill the feedback form as mentioned in the chat box for getting e-certificates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.